And watching all of that will be Richie and Alan. But we're going to start with a look at what's been happening on the international front, because there has been a further twist in the debate over the rights and wrongs of the Republic of Ireland's Nations League games against Israel this autumn. This evening, Joanna Byrne TD said in a statement issued through Sinn Féin that she has been asked to resign as co-chair of the American-owned Drogheda United over comments she made last week in which she said Ireland should not play the fixtures. Here's part of the statement. We'll be putting up the other part in a moment. You might notice the second paragraph there in which she says, "It is profoundly hurtful that expressing a moral view has led to this approach, despite me never referencing the club at any stage while doing this." Richie, so we know that the League of Ireland in the domestic game is already affected to a certain degree and have already been involved because of the EGM and the General Assembly vote last year, but it appears to be now permeating even further.
It's Drogheda United today. I think this is going to be a story we're going to see repeated several times in many clubs and associations all over Irish football for the next several months because of this fixture being staged. And it's bizarre. You used the phrase, the rights and wrongs of playing a football match, in a wider discussion where you have to grapple with the fact that there is credible allegations and mounting evidence that one of the countries involved in this match are engaged in genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced starvation, detention centres which have been described as torture camps, apartheid, forced displacement, like the worst crimes that exist. And many people, and like a level of cruelty that many people like myself naively and stupidly thought would never be allowed to happen, that the world would unite against it and prevent it if it happened anywhere. Should the game be played? No. Should Israel be allowed to compete in this competition? No. Will the game be played? I think it will be. The government have said it will be. The FAI said they will attend and play and fulfil the fixture. And I think the difficult and horrible and spirit-crushing reality that we have to accept is that in the world of football at the moment, the punishment for taking a moral stance against all of the crimes that I outlined is far greater than the punishment being meted out to the country that are alleged to have carried out those crimes. It would be an act of self-sabotage from the FAI to boycott it, because I think UEFA will absolutely crush them to make it such a strong deterrent for anyone else even considering doing the same.
And yet, 93% of the General Assembly voted to ask the FAI to kick Israel out of the competition the end of last year.
Because I think 93% of that General Assembly and its members, Joanne, know right from wrong, and for all the things that Richie has outlined here. But sadly, the last part that he finished on is because of maybe how heavy we think that UEFA will come down on Ireland if they follow through with a boycott, and off the back of that vote with the General Assembly, it could lead to the ruination of football, if you like, here. We just don't know in terms of the sanctions. They're already in financial peril, the FAI. So a major part of a lot of decisions in the world, and particularly this one, will be influenced by the sanctions that may come their way, sadly. But as Richie outlined quite eloquently there, and as you said in terms of the General Assembly, and if we were all to sit down in an ideal world and say, should this game be going ahead, and for all the reasons why it shouldn't, we'd all agree it shouldn't. But in terms of, I suppose, the flip side of that from the FAI's point of view, I do have a little bit of sympathy in that regard as well, Joanne, because UEFA are the ones, the governing body, who should be taking charge and taking control of this situation and implementing the rules that have been breached and broken here quite clearly, but they're not doing that. So the FAI will argue they have to take their lead off them.
Well, why? Do they not take their lead off the 93% of people who said, we don't want Israel involved in this competition?
But for the reasons I just said, in terms of the financial side of things, that we know the mess that the FAI are coming from and where the angle that they're coming from for that point of view, Joanne. That's why I think ultimately it will come down to that. When you look at this statement you just read out in terms of Joanna Byrne, and this another development, and we may see more developments down the line, but it's an American ownership Travella. Joanna obviously feels as though, as she's outlined there in the statement, but already you can see just even in the top line there, this position that Joanna has taken is in line with the Drogheda United delegates, and the fear now on a domestic level, which is a lot less than what we're speaking about in terms of Ireland, Israel and the greater good of the game. You will see division maybe come across at Drogheda United Football Club now as a result of maybe some of the stance that she's taken, the moral stance, as she said herself.
We asked both UEFA and the FAI, we sent through questions asking if Ireland's hosting of Euro 2028 will be affected if they do boycott the games. We got no response. We asked if Irish clubs in Europe and their participation, because we know how financially important that is, if it'll be affected. We haven't received any replies.
I think the missing crucial detail from this conversation, this debate, which is going to run for months, nobody at all has any sight on what the consequences of pulling out of the game will be. Nobody, because the information doesn't exist. The rulings as on the UEFA, as UEFA stated, are vague. They're non-specific. So it's down to your reading or your kind of call on what do we think they were likely to do. And we don't know much, but we know obviously there's a hypocrisy, a corruption, a moral bankruptcy, a lack of leadership, like maybe some or all of those things at the heart of any organisation which punishes Russian crimes against Ukrainians but ignores crimes by Israel against Palestinians.
Well, hold on.
So I wouldn't be sitting here thinking, you know, we can expect UEFA to do the right thing. We can expect loads of
these organisations said the reason for that is because the reason they kicked out Russia is because countries said we will not play them, and that nobody has said that about Israel. And here is Ireland's chance to say, well, we're not going to play them.
But also on that Russia one, you had Poland who took the initial stance. They were backed by Czech Republic and Sweden, Joanne. So you have three countries all of a sudden. We're on our own in this.
Well, somebody had to start it, Alan.
Oh no, absolutely. But what I'm saying is if Poland had to take the stance like we're taking on our own maybe at the moment and follow through, they may not have followed through with it. The fact that they were backed up by Czech Republic and Sweden, I think it made it a whole lot easier, and also for UEFA to realise there's three countries now that we have to deal with. Whereas at the moment we're looking at maybe Kosovo or Austria, who were drawn in the same group as us. Are they going to align themselves with us? At the moment it doesn't look like that. So we're kind of out on a limb at the moment, rightly from a moral point of view, as we've all agreed. But in terms of the implications that might lead to for the FAI, that's the quandary they find themselves in, sadly, Joanne.
I think that, like, the idealist in me thinks that if any country anywhere, we'll use us as the example here, were to take a moral stance and pull out of playing this fixture, and under the threat of any UEFA sanction, you get a real collective response from other FAs and other countries all over Europe standing in front and around and beside us saying, enough's enough. But this thing has been going on a long time. There's a mounting body count, 70,000, 80,000. We don't know what the figure is. It's probably way above that. And nobody has done anything. So if no countries are going to react in a meaningful way to that statistic, why in the name of God do you think they'd react strongly to the Ireland team being sanctioned by UEFA?
Well, we simply don't know.
We don't know.
But here's another question. If 93% of the General Assembly voted to ask UEFA to ban Israel, we asked the FAI if they're likely to put it back to the General Assembly, maybe call an EGM and see what the clubs and what the delegates felt. If they did that, and everybody said, yes, let's boycott it, what did the FAI do then? Well,
that's the position, as I say, Joanne, because when that vote was made and that motion was kind of submitted back in November, you had the President coming out straight afterwards saying, but we will play them if we're drawn against them. So you can't speak out of both sides of your mouth either. As I said, I'm trying to outline a position where I can understand the FAI's point of view. For the financial reasons, we can absolutely. But also, when that was made, that motion, you can't have it both ways, and that's the problem. And were they really going to follow through with it? It's been put to them now that it's on the table, that this is the reality of it. Are you going to follow through with it? And as you says, will it be put back to another vote?
Will it? Do you think it will?
I think it might be, but whether this game goes ahead or not, right now I can see it going ahead.
Richie, do you think it'll be put back to the delegates?
It may be, and that's the nightmare scenario for the FAI. They have to, you would assume, go against all their members or make a decision which could financially ruin the game in this country for years. It's an organisation at the moment which has pushed through a load of redundancies at the moment. We've talked at length in recent years about the fact that football in this country is on its arse and has been for years. So to make a decision now that could jeopardise UEFA funding, jeopardise our participation in competitions, jeopardise League of Ireland clubs in Europe, none of us know what the consequences are, but they're the ones that would be the first things to be considered. For any board of the FAI to stand over a decision like that is the nightmare scenario for them all. And it's desperately unfair. We're talking now about Drogheda United at the start of the conversation, the board of the FAI now. Sooner or later, unfair questions are going to be asked of the Irish footballers about whether or not they have a stance, whether or not they feel like they're comfortable and prepared to play. And it'll be put to them by some quarters that it's
Are
a
they
moral
unfair questions?
it's a moral failing on their part to even play the game, which is a situation that is of UEFA's creating, and it is just desperately unfair. But we better get used to this conversation and this heated, really heavy atmosphere on a football programme, because
and
we're now in their group, so this issue isn't going to go away.
And those things that Richie just said in terms of the game itself and the ramifications, they're real factors, Joanne. They have to be brought into the consideration when we're discussing this. There's no getting away from that. As I said, the moral side of things, absolutely, we're all in agreement. Everybody is in agreement with that. But in terms of the game and the position they find themselves in, I absolutely get both sides in that regard.